On the eve of her 35th birthday, Kate was living the happiest moment of her life, married to a loving husband named Evan, surrounded by close friends, and living in a home filled with laughter. As she prepared to welcome guests, her hands suddenly trembled, and the glass slipped from her fingers. She didn't think much of it. In the middle of the celebration, Evan complimented her beauty, assuring her she only grew more enchanting with time. Kate played the piano with the grace and skill her talent deserved. But in an instant, the tremor returned, reminding her that something had begun to change. 18 months later, her world had turned upside down. Kate could no longer hold a glass of water. She had become paralyzed. Evan became her shadow, dressing her, preparing her, even gently applying her powder, fully aware of how important it was for her to still feel feminine despite her illness. Meanwhile, a young woman named Beck woke up late after a night out, realizing she was running behind for an important job interview. On the other side, Kate told her husband she'd let go of her previous nurse, but reassured him she'd already found a new one. When Evan opened the door, he was surprised to find a young woman standing there in casual clothes and an easygoing smile, as if she'd just come to deliver an order, not to care for a seriously ill patient. When he asked to see her resume, Beck pulled a crumpled piece of paper from her pocket, deepening his doubts. How could someone who seemed so scattered handle such a huge responsibility? But Kate saw what he didn't. A pure spirit and real experience caring for the elderly, thanks to Beck's volunteer work at a senior care home. Kate wasn't looking for a nurse with perfect credentials. She wanted someone whose presence would remind her she was still human, not just a medical case. Evan began teaching Beck how to prepare Kate special meals filled with anxiety, as if he were handing over his most precious heart to hands that didn't know what they were doing. Sure enough, Beck quickly turned the kitchen into chaos, and her confusion peaked when asked to help Kate in the bathroom. A situation so awkward it left her stammering from embarrassment. Still, Kate watched her with a mix of wonder and kindness. Beck's manners were rough, her jokes sometimes hurtful, and during one attempt to help Kate stand, she accidentally knocked her over. Kate didn't get angry, she simply offered a faint smile. Late that night, Beck sat at a bar, laughing with her friend Jill after pouring out her heart about the latest meltdown she'd just endured. What surprised her more than her own failure was Kate's patience. Why hadn't she fired her? Beck dreamed of finding her voice on stage, and today she'd landed a golden opportunity. But as usual, fear overwhelmed her, and she rushed to the bathroom to throw up from sheer anxiety. Unexpectedly, she ran into her former college professor there. She tried to connect with him in an innocent, almost naive way, only to later discover he was married. She kept drinking until she was drunk, then left with a guy named Will. The professor followed her, confessing his genuine admiration, but apologized, citing his marriage as the reason he couldn't pursue anything. That evening, when Evan returned home, he told Kate he planned to bring back the previous nurse, praising her flawless competence compared to Beck. Before they went to sleep, he washed his wife's face as he always did. But Kate stayed awake all night, lost in thought about Beck, feeling something strange she couldn't quite explain. The next morning, Beck woke up with a pounding hangover. She never expected Evan to call and demand she come back. Of course, only because Kate had insisted firmly. From that day on, Beck's lateness became a daily habit, each time inventing a new ridiculous excuse. This went on for weeks. Evan believed his wife needed social connection, so he arranged for her to meet her friends that day to take her mind off her worries. But because he was so consumed by work, he rarely made it home until very late. During the day, Beck wheeled Kate to the store to buy dinner supplies, but Beck admitted she had absolutely no idea how to cook. That evening, Kate received her friends. Each of them was absorbed in their own busy lives, while she couldn't even lift a fork to her mouth. Still, she refused Beck's help in front of them. Everyone sat around praising Evan, calling Kate lucky that her husband was still by her side because if it were anyone else, he would have left her long ago. After the guests left, Kate asked Beck to bring Evan's tablet and open his email. Beck felt deeply uncomfortable, but Kate suspected Evan was cheating. He'd been coming home so late. Her fears were quickly confirmed when she discovered messages between him and another woman. Tears nearly burst out, but she held them back and immediately told Beck to leave. Late into the night, and Evan still hadn't returned. Beck went to the bar and poured her heart out to Jill about what had happened. She'd never seen Evan's wife so utterly broken before. In a desperate attempt to regain control, Kate tried to walk down the stairs alone and collapsed onto the floor. Minutes later, Beck received a message from Kate completely blank. Beck panicked and rushed to her house, where she found Kate in terrible condition, refusing to let her husband see her like this. Beck cleaned her with rare tenderness, overwhelmed by deep remorse. Kate looked at her and said firmly, "I want to leave this house now." When Evan returned, he found the room empty. On the bed, his tablet abandoned. In that instant, he understood. Kate had discovered everything. Meanwhile, Beck had taken Kate to her small apartment, which she shared with Jill, who never expected to host a guest in such a painful situation. Kate's phone kept buzzing with messages from Evan, but she didn't reply, as if she'd silently decided to shut the door for good. Beck helped her lie down, then opened up. She spoke about her dream of singing on stage, but admitted she'd made no real progress. Even her own parents didn't believe in her talent. After that, she let Kate rest. The next morning, Evan's phone showed hundreds of missed calls, all from him, but she still didn't answer. Kate asked Beck to drive her to a care facility. She said she wanted to stay there so she wouldn't be a burden on the husband in the prime of his life. She began blaming herself and even tried to justify his betrayal. After all, the illness wasn't his fault. But Beck realized the decision was purely emotional and sharply objected. There's no excuse for betrayal, no matter the circumstances. Kate didn't understand why Beck kept insisting on helping her. The young woman answered with rare honesty. She saw in Kate the spirit of her late grandmother whom Beck had cared for before. Kate then asked Beck to drive her to Evan. When he saw her after moments of frantic worry, joy flooded his face. But it quickly turned to shock when she told him, "Either you leave this house, or I will." She could no longer bear living under the weight of guilt, constantly wondering if she'd ruined the life of a man who didn't deserve to be trapped in her tragedy. As they passed by his secretary Cynthia's desk, Kate looked at her and said bitterly, "Now, Evan is all yours." Back home, Beck returned Kate to the house. Kate sat in silence, then whispered, "Maybe today I made the biggest mistake of my life," before quickly reassuring Beck that she'd handle things on her own. But Beck refused to leave, afraid Kate's despair might push her to do something irreversible. In that moment, Kate didn't need a nurse. She needed a real friend. Later, Beck played an old recording of a piano concert Kate had once given. Kate immediately asked her to turn it off. Memories of the past were too painful. In the middle of the night, Kate's condition suddenly worsened. She struggled to breathe, while Beck stood helpless, not knowing what to do. She rushed to the phone and called emergency services, but Kate, regaining her breath, calmly asked her to cancel the call. Then, in a chillingly quiet voice, she added, "I don't want to be a bother." Later, after a university lecture, the professor continued his attempts to get closer to Beck. Surprised, he asked her why she hadn't returned his call. Beck felt insulted by the professor's words, but eventually gave in to her need to escape and buried herself in her books as a safe refuge. Meanwhile, Kate visited her doctor, who coldly informed her that her worsening condition was an irreversible part of the disease's progression. There would be no improvement, only increasing dependence on others. In a moment of innocent curiosity, Beck tried on one of Kate's elegant dresses and her stylish heels. Kate's closet was a treasure trove of grace and beauty, and the young woman burst into a rare, joyful laugh. When Kate refused to switch to an electric wheelchair, seeing it as surrendering to the illness, Beck gently convinced her there was absolutely no shame in it. The two women spent an unforgettable day, shopping filled with laughter, followed by a meeting with Marlene and John. Marlene suffered from the same disease slowly devouring Kate's body. But love still radiated from John's eyes, and Marlene's smile never faded. It was clear John adored his wife deeply. Beck and Kate agreed to visit the couple again soon. During that visit, Kate felt something she hadn't experienced in years: genuine joy. In those moments, she wasn't a patient. She was a lively, laughing human being. All evening, Evan kept trying to call his wife, begging to hear her voice, apologizing, explaining. He had no idea Kate was spending the night at a bar with Beck and her friends. Will, who'd always tried to get close to Beck, continued flirting with her gently, but she'd never opened the door to him. He urged her to step back on stage, insisting her voice was magical. But Beck no longer believed she had anything worth hearing. On their way home, Kate told Beck that Will seemed kinder than she'd expected. Then she drifted into memories, recalling her first meeting with Evan 15 years ago. Now, she felt a faint regret for not giving him a chance, but she knew it no longer mattered. Soon after, Kate and Beck prepared to attend a party at a friend's house. Kelly was celebrating her daughter's 5th birthday, so the home was filled with laughter, decorations, and the sounds of children. Alicia, another friend, had just welcomed a newborn. For all these women, life was beginning anew, while Kate felt as if she were slowly saying goodbye to hers. Suddenly, Kate had a seizure. The moment Evan heard the news, he rushed to the scene. Exhaustion was etched all over him, his face thin, eyes sunken, as if grief had carved his features. But when Kate saw him, she made it clear she wasn't ready to see him. He swore he'd cut all ties with Cynthia, but Kate's words were already unraveling, stumbling, fading, losing coherence. Beck stepped in, translating her feelings clearly. This was never about Cynthia. It never was, not from the start. Kate loved Evan so deeply that she was willing to walk away from him, even if it shattered her. All he could do was leave, his tears falling before his footsteps did. Later, Kate confessed to Beck that her body was slipping away from her more each day. She'd always dreamed of motherhood, but fate had denied her that chance. Now, that dream was forever impossible. Then, in a voice nearly choked with emotion, she said all she wanted was to scream. So she did, and Beck screamed with her. In that shared cry, Kate felt, perhaps for the first time in a long while, a small measure of relief. At her next doctor's visit, Kate received another harsh truth. With time, breathing would become increasingly difficult. The two spent quiet hours among the trees and fresh air, as if nature had granted them a temporary truce. There, Kate realized time was accelerating, and the end was drawing near. Beck tried to encourage her not to give up, even though they both knew the truth. There was no cure, no miracle, no hope. Thanksgiving approached, and they decided to make it unforgettable. They invited Marlene and John, Jill, and even Will. They gathered around a warm table filled with laughter and honest faces. In that circle of love, Kate forgot, even if just for a moment, the disease's cruel verdict and simply lived as a person, not a patient. After dinner, Will asked Beck to dance. In the middle of that moment, Kate quietly asked Marlene if she ever felt sad since she could only watch now, not take part. Marlene replied softly that she was listening more deeply than ever before. Will took the chance to confess his feelings to Beck again, but she made it clear she wasn't ready for a serious relationship. She was surprised to learn he could read lips, thanks to his deaf brother, which explained why he understood Kate so easily. Suddenly, a sharp knock came at the door. It was the college professor, drunk this time, asking for a fun night. But for the first time, Beck found the strength within herself to say no, and she sent him away without hesitation. Not long after, Marlene was rushed to the hospital. Her condition had deteriorated suddenly, and she slipped into a coma from which she never woke. When Kate heard the news, her heart trembled with fear. She didn't want her own end to be like that, so she pleaded in prayer, begging God that her final moments wouldn't be like Marlene's. Shortly afterward, Kate's friends, Kelly and Alicia, met with Beck for a direct conversation. They didn't trust her and doubted her intentions, convinced she had some hidden agenda. When they started discussing Kate's will, Beck immediately walked out. When she returned home, she was shocked to find a stranger standing in the living room. It turned out Kate had decided to hire a second nurse to ease Beck's burden. But Beck rejected the idea completely. She couldn't bear the thought of handing Kate's care over to someone she didn't know. Later, Kate calmly explained that this was the best solution because she didn't want her friend's musical future to be distracted by her illness. Beck reassured her everything was fine. One night, Evan knocked on the door. His longing for his wife had reached its peak, so he came begging her to come back. He admitted his mistake and promised to be more patient and understanding. Hearing his words, Kate burst into tears. She had forgiven him long ago, but her heart still refused to live with him again. Christmas approached, and Beck decorated the tree. Her parents, Elizabeth and Bruce, showed up unannounced. They welcomed Kate warmly and agreed to stay for dinner. But when Elizabeth was alone with her daughter, the masks came off. She dropped the pretense of kindness, criticizing Beck for skipping university lectures and accusing her of wasting her future. She insisted that caring for Kate, who had only a short time left, wasn't noble, it was just an escape from responsibility. It's meaningless failure, she added coldly. Beck refused to argue further and walked away. But when she returned downstairs, she discovered in horror that the baby monitor had been on the whole time. Kate had heard every word. Kate hadn't known Beck had dropped out of college. With a heart torn between love and guilt, she asked Beck to leave the house. She no longer wanted to be the reason her friend's future was ruined. All she wished for now was to see Beck fulfill her dreams. But those words cut Beck deeply. She feared leaving Kate alone with no one to protect her, no one to laugh with her in her loneliness. Still, she had no choice but to go. For the first time in years, Kate visited her mother, Gwen. Their relationship had never been warm, but the illness made Kate long for family by her side, even if their presence felt cold. Soon after, a loud birthday party was held, attended by Evan and many of Kate's relatives. Beck felt a piercing loneliness. Will approached her gently and asked how she was doing. She told him her relationship with Kate had become strained and that she was carrying a pain she didn't know how to bear. He tried to ask her out on a date, but she declined. Suddenly, an urgent call came in, and Beck rushed back to Kate. She found Evan caring for his wife in her final hours. Marlene had passed away, and Beck wanted to tell Kate herself, but Evan hesitated, saying it wasn't the right time. Instead, he left her a message, a letter John had sent to their friends after Marlene's death. Evan read it softly to Kate. In it, Marlene wrote that despite the cruelty of her illness, it had taught her to love life more deeply and to find beauty in the simplest moments. Gwen reached out to hold her daughter's hand, but Kate suddenly suffered a severe seizure and was rushed to the hospital. Kate had previously made it clear she didn't want her life artificially prolonged. Now, Evan and Gwen stood helpless before the decision. Evan believed they had to honor her wishes, but Gwen refused. She couldn't accept losing her daughter. When Beck heard the news, she ran straight to the hospital without hesitation. She entered the room, and their hands intertwined for the last time. In Kate's eyes, Beck saw a decision made long ago. Kate didn't want artificial life. But behind the door, Gwen screamed in furious protest. Kate insisted on returning home even though that meant she had only a few short days left. After much hesitation, the family finally agreed to respect her will. She wanted to say goodbye to life where her story began, surrounded by walls she loved and faces that gave her warmth, not by tubes and alarm machines. Beck gently placed Kate's frail hands on the piano keys and softly helped her play. Just one moment, but it was enough to bring light back to Kate's eyes. The disease had stolen everything, even the music that once lived in her soul. Evan wept in silence, overwhelmed by helplessness. He couldn't stay with her in her final moments, but he pulled himself together, leaned close, and whispered, "I love you more than you'll ever know." Then he left, tears streaming down his cheeks. Kate asked Beck not to call anyone if she had another seizure, and she made her promise one thing, to one day find a man who truly loves her, no matter how dark the future may seem. From the depths of her heart, Kate thanked her friend for teaching her what real love is, and that responsibility can be the highest form of loyalty. After that, Kate asked to be left alone. Beck cried all night, unable to sleep. And in a moment of raw human weakness, she couldn't bear the thought of Kate dying alone, so she ran back to her room, refusing to let her face the darkness by herself. Days passed after Kate's death, but Beck remained drowned in grief, unable to find her way out of the pain. Will sat beside her, not with empty words, but with warm silence, because some wounds aren't healed by talking, but simply by being there. And that's how the film ends. If you liked this summary, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Wishing you a wonderful evening, wherever you are. See you in the next summary.